AZ just stepped away from momentarily, so we'll wait for her to get back. And are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the November 19th meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. It is 7:02 and we'll bring the meeting to order, call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the addition, removal, adjustment of any items, and then implicit approval thereof. Does anybody have anything they would like to propose to change on the agenda?
I do not.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Okay. Next item is old business. It's an update on Middlebury College work with the political science group. Jessica Teets has been in contact with some of her winter term students. She's got about 10 students that are interested in working on a project pretty much formulated as we talked about at the October meeting. So she's pretty optimistic about that. And I think you've been in touch with her as well.
Yeah, we have a tentative meeting date of January 7th to meet with the students. It might be a little different, but beginning of January, right before their term starts, I'll be meeting with Jessica and the students to kind of go over the scope of what we're looking for, introduce myself to the students, be a resource for them as well. But that's for beginning of January.
Great. On to new. Does anybody have any comments or questions about where we're at with that?
I do.
Oh, John, I'm sorry.
Just responding to AZ. So what is the scope of what we're looking for?
We had discussed this the October 15th.
Let me pull up what I.
But we're breaking up into I think 3 different kind of scopes, looking at best practices of other municipalities and the state and other ordinances that are used to best develop housing, looking at density studies, identifying where in Bristol density already is, where density could be developed further, where it should not be developed. And then there's a third scope. I can't remember off the top of my head.
So
but-
there's a certain amount of community consultation, education as well, maybe.
Yeah, so and the third one, like community work, talking with residents about what they actually would like to see. But those are the 3 scopes that were kind of decided upon.
Great. Thanks for the refresher.
Yeah.
Anything else with that? Okay. So underneath new business, the topic is affordability and rentals, and backing up a little bit, Brother Moyers had circulated a VPR article that was sent out, and it had more to do with short-term rentals, which is always a topic. Discussion in preparation for this meeting with AZ, we sort of thought we would back up a little bit and look at the affordabilities of rentals. And from that point of view, it would encompass short-term rentals, and it would also encompass potentially longer-term rentals, and maybe look at it from the point of view of how there's benefits and detractors to some of the things that we've been talking about, that and some of them are state protected as like ADUs, and now duplexes can be put where single family ones. So I don't really have, I did take some sound bites out of the VPR article, and summarized them a little bit, and some of the pros and cons that that article, touched upon, which I thought was pretty encompassing. So I probably shouldn't say a whole lot more and just open it up to, the group to see what sort of thoughts or comments or where we, if there's something here that we should focus on as we continue looking at housing.
I'll get you a copy.
Can I get a clarification? You said
Sure.
that duplexes are now replacing single family?
So the duplexes are permitted use that's equivalent to a single family use application.
Meaning ADU can now go with a duplex?
No, so the duplex would be 2 units without any sort of regard about the relationship between them. If they met all the setbacks, you can put a duplex as a permitted use where you could put a single family house. An ADU, you can put an ADU and it gets kind of, there's some semantics here, but you come in an ADU, which is permitted use.
Yeah.
But it has to be the way the state wrote it and the way that we've got it in our zoning regulations. It's got to be a minor less than the size of the main unit.
Sure, but previously, no ADU could be occupied if it was a duplex on the.
Correct. It cannot be, that's true, and it still holds to be that.
That's true.
Yeah, so you can't have a duplex and an ADU.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, so you can have one or the other. So
Okay.
so what the state intent was to provide more flexibility, what you can do in
One
your,
or the other.
yeah,
Good
so.
enough.
Has anybody got any opening comments or thoughts?
John?
John,
Yeah, I would like in this process talking about especially, you know, sort of short-term versus long-term housing, but also affordability. I'd like us to invite some public testimony from people, from community members. If they, it would be telling if a bunch showed up or if none showed up, but if, I think some would if we put it out there. And I'd like to hear what people think about the issues and what their experience is, and you know, whatever they know and what they think about it and where they might direct us to go. And it would serve the secondary purpose of generating some public interest in planning and zoning issues generally, which is always a struggle that we contemplate. So a little public testimony, maybe we get some Airbnb operators here in town to come and talk, and I don't know, maybe general public would be interested too. So I'd love to create that kind of opportunity at some point at the right time in the process.
so are you alluding to just opening it up, and if you want to come and talk, you come, or are you looking to get certain people in that would have experience or present a point of view from a certain aspect?
Well, I was kind of inspired by the VPR article. Thanks for sending that transcript. It was good to reread, by the way. Yeah, you know, when you talk to people in the community, in this instance, it was in different county, but you know, they bring information forward. They bring forward their experience and their thoughts and fears and successes and failures on it. And I think it'd be interesting if we invited people. Hey, we're talking about this issue. If you're an Airbnb operator or a landlord of any kind or whatever, come share with us your experience. I don't know what, if anything, that might generate, but might be interesting to invite folks.
Okay,
Thanks.
I know a couple of folks who have applied for ADUs with the intent to rent either the ADU or the primary household. So I can reach out to those folks.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question that's just a little bit off topic, but for ADUs or even for apartments and stuff, what is it in Vermont? Who, I guess, inspects those? Is there any kind of inspection uh, over time, or it's just up to the landlord to maintain it? I mean, like if someone found like black mold in their apartment, who do they go to if the landlord doesn't do anything?
Well, it depends on where you live.
Yeah.
For Burlington, you would go to,
Well, I
the-
meant here.
I know,
I meant, yeah,
I'm using an example
Health
of like in
officer?
Burlington, you would go, here you would go
yeah.
to Marshall or the health inspector,
Yeah,
or
Okay.
probably
whatever.
be the fire marshal.
Yeah, for Bristol, it's the fire marshal. He's also in charge of doing all inspections of fire code. Bristol does
Mhm.
not require getting those inspections done before having an apartment building put in. It's more of a state thing.
Ah, okay.
For Bristol, for any residential building, it needs to have a cook surface, heating, water and septic, and a living space, living area. So those.
And an emergency exit, no? Or that's not a thing.
Not part of the
Yeah.
requirements.
That
It's
that's
That's,
not a local thing. That would be a state life safety.
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Because I know some of the apartments on Main Street do not have emergency exits.
The state,
So unless you jump out the window, I guess.
yeah, well, the state considers jumping out the window and I literally, I think the standard is, would you break one or both legs or something like that?
Jesus.
And if you only
Ah.
break both legs and live, then it's might be adequate escape.
Yeah. So if you're 20, you're okay, but if you're 65 or 70, then it's
But
there's a different result at the end of that.
I
All
mean,
right, thank you.
there really is no inspection in Bristol.
Yeah.
I don't know about other towns, but I know I've purchased buildings and kind of wondered how people could almost be allowed to live in them, you know, because
Yeah.
they're deplorable. And I know I bought one building and the tenants reported spending $1,000 a month on propane in the middle of the winter, and they never got their thermostat over 50 degrees.
Jesus. Yeah.
I don't think that qualifies as a residence in my mind. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just like
Well,
crazy.
my store space doesn't get above 62. The heat goes to 62 and it never turns off once it gets down, you know.
So,
So
Melissa,
anyway.
you have comments about the thoughts about affordability with different types of rental units?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't even. I mean, there's no limit or anything. I mean, people can ask what they want to ask for their rentals. I take it, or what they can get. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know of existing places that would be considered affordable, if you know what I mean. I mean, I think it's, to me, if we're going to expand, we need to have some affordability and some rental units that are actually affordable and not just called that, if you know what I mean. You know, if people are working in Bristol, I mean, if they're working in Burlington or in Williston, I mean, it's possible that they're making more than if they were working in Bristol. But
There is an official way
yeah.
of establishing a sort of baseline affordability
Mhm.
measure, and I don't, maybe somebody knows what it is, but it's a certain percentage of one's gross income. So I don't know,
Right.
30% or something like that.
That would be a good place to start, so we know kind of what we're looking
Yeah.
at.
So those numbers definitely exist, because I believe the state of Vermont, at least, and it wouldn't surprise me, Bill, you would know this if the Regional Planning Commission keeps these numbers, but there is a sort of county by county, I think, if not town by town, but I think county by county affordability, you know, not standard, but
Like average, whatever.
something like
Yeah.
that. There's a way
Yeah.
of looking at it. People do look at what's affordable, and it's
Yeah.
compared to the local mean income or something like that.
I can
Yeah.
tell you what the standards are,
Yeah,
since it's something I do with a different hat on. 30% of income is what they like to keep people within or less.
Uh-huh.
The, um, the standards regionally depend on median income. And an affordable housing unit is designed for people that make 80% of the median income or less. And quite often, state and federally supported projects, they break it out further to get down to 40% of median income. And some units will be 100% that. They might have an 8-unit building, and they'll make 100%. Others will break it up and do some market rate and then some 80%, 60%. It really depends upon the developer and what the economics might be in terms of making the building sustainable, affordable. And in order to be eligible for any of the federal and state dollars, the rule is it has to be financially affordable for at least a 15-year period of time. And they have to demonstrate that. So Addison County's median income is less than Chittenden, but our median income is probably more than Orange, or certainly Orleans. And you can get that information by Googling what the median income is per county in Vermont, I think. But Chittenden County is the highest.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Slim, what are your thoughts about the different aspects of rental and affordability?
I think there's so little affordability that it's even a joke to kind of talk about it. Given the real wages that many entry jobs, I'll call them, will pay. Because I mean, if you make $20 an hour all the time, you only make 40,000 before taxes. 30% of 40,000 is 12,000. And yes, you can find an apartment for 12,000, but those people are not actually making 40,000 because of many reasons. So I don't know. I would love to see a. I mean, is it even possible to have a public-private cooperation on some kind of quality but small square footage type of really affordable, if not like luxurious, but nice enough to feel like you're not slumming it. But only way I can imagine that working is having the public sector be somewhat involved. It's a nonprofit, clearly, type of situation. Otherwise, yeah.
Okay, Shannon.
So my thought on the affordability issue is that our biggest opportunity are the ADUs. It's the older folks that own their homes that could be broken up into 2 units, that it would be extra income for them. But they wouldn't have to charge so much that a low-income Vermonter couldn't afford it. That's sort of how I feel about it. You know, I guess it's hard if you own a rental property to think that, you know, are you going to charge low enough rent that you don't make any money? That's not a reasonable thought, in my opinion. So I guess we go back to that zoning and pushing maybe those ADUs and those duplexes where somebody doesn't have to charge those extra high fees. I don't know about, you know, the unfortunate problem that we have in the state of Vermont, which is that we don't have enough housing in general. And that drives the prices up across the board.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Oh, I got him.
There
Okay.
we go. My understanding of the measures of affordability is much the same as Fred's. Of course, we have estimates for median family income, sometimes median household income by county and even by town occasionally. And so we can get a 30% measure of that from those numbers. The affordability issue, I have a couple points to make that haven't already been stated by others. much of which I agree with. But one is that the overall problem is a lack of supply. Supply of housing has been constrained largely by overregulation, in my view, and particularly in the availability of land on which to build housing, and then the regulatory burden associated with Act 250 and other rules and regulations that add to the cost of construction. So if we want to bring down the growth rate and the price of housing, or possibly even bring the price down itself, we have to figure out ways to increase the supply. And what's interesting is that if we increase the supply in the mid-range, which can be a market where a builder can cover his costs and then earn a return, that creates an escalator effect where people who were maybe at a less expensive, less square footage home or an older home can trade up to that newly created middle income home. And in so doing, create what we generally would call affordable housing at a lower level of income. Those homes become available as people trade up into a higher quality or price of home. The last point I'd make is something that I've been reading about from time to time lately, and that is the increasing popularity of the tiny homes. I think those are a version of accessory unit, could be at least, but in any case, very compact, very modest square footage, but certainly more affordable. And I don't think we should rule out giving them more consideration than we have in the past.
Thanks. So, my thoughts is this whole conversation is focused on the person or the family that would be the inhabitants of whatever the space is, whether it's a house, duplex, ADU, short-term rental. The thing I got out of that article that I found was interesting was the article touched base on the fact that, at least within the context of that article, people were developing short-term rental, but it applies as well with ADUs, and I know personally from a duplex point of view, it applies, is it makes it affordable for the person that owns that property to be able to continue to use that property. So there's two aspects of affordability, if you will, from what I gleaned from that article. And everybody's obviously right that there's a threshold for people to be able to enter into housing, but there's also an issue with escalating costs and aging population going into retirement, what have you, as to the need to supplement income that makes those different types of rentals very attractive for a property owner. The other thing in that article I saw, and maybe we could touch upon that a little bit, is where the demand ends up being for particularly short-term rentals, not so much for longer-term rentals, but the article identified some less than flowery stories about short-term rentals that were large bed operations in one house unit or whatever you want to call it, but it seemed to draw out that the demand for short-term rental is lockstep with tourism, specifically skiing or destination locations. And how do you think that plays into Bristol and the risk of imbalance from short-term rentals versus longer-term rentals? John?
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of take off my planning commission hat here and speak as somebody who does run rentals long-term and short-term, and what I call like long, short-term rentals. So not really Airbnb style, though sometimes they come through Airbnb, but one of my big markets for my smaller places is people in life transitions, local people in life transitions. Sometimes change of circumstances at home, separations or what have you, young people moving out on their own for a short time before they get set up somewhere with a job. Somebody's older parents coming to stay for 4 months in the summer, be close to their family. Not exactly Airbnb, definitely not party house type stuff or weekenders, but a very real need in the community for that kind of housing. And it happens to match what I have, because I have some spaces that frankly are not really appropriate for full-time living. They need to be maintained closely. They need, they're like living full-time would be a little hard on them, or it might be hard on the circumstances where those places are located. Better not to have a full-time person, but if it's a part of the year here and there, it can work, depending on circumstances. So there is that flexibility that's not quite Airbnb, but also definitely not full-time. Has been, in my experience as a landlord in Bristol, in downtown Bristol, where all my units are, it fills a real need in the community. Like, and there is the economic side. So for example, there are academics who come for 2 to 3 months in the summer to work at, say, at Middlebury or Breadloaf or that sort of thing. And, they're repeats, they're professional people. They come for 3 months at a time. They may come 2-3 years running. Like real interesting contribution to the community to have them here. And again, those flex spaces, there aren't quite what we all think of when we think of Airbnb. We think, oh, the weekenders, not that at all, but still a need. Anyway, I'll stop there, but that's another facet, another niche.
Thanks. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I can as well on that,
Go ahead.
Kevin, because really, we have both long-term rentals and we have a couple of short-term rentals. And the short-term rentals, we have not advertised on Airbnb, but we have the visiting nurses. And those are 13 to 26 weeks. And I've got 2 units that I can keep full all the time just with those visiting nurses. I mean, it might be 1 or 2 weeks where it's kind of slows down, but they come here, they're working here. They need a place to stay. So I'm not having any problem keeping those full any more than I'm having keeping the other 2 units full, just like John. There's not a lot of lag time on any of these things. There's always a need, and always somebody waiting in line.
Yeah. I mean, and just to add to that, just on the medical thing, last year, I think it was for a total of almost 6 months, I housed 2 dentists who worked at the sliding scale dental clinic at Mountain Health. And, they were retired dentists, but they come and they've, work and their spouses were able to come and they set up and participate in the community and everything. So not a hotel, not an Airbnb, not a weekender, but a short-term space, flex space that let me meet their needs. And it was great all the way around for them and for me.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
I-
So.
Have we looked, it's a little off of this, but do we have what the rental rates are? And I'm talking for the long term in Bristol? You know, when you say, we want to build more medium so that people in the lower level can move up, but how much of that lower level do we actually have of that actually affordable how, units? How do we get that information?
It's gotta be there. Bill, probably the Regional Planning Commission keeps something like that, wouldn't you think?
Maybe it's
Say
likelihood.
again, John, what piece of information you're looking for?
What Melissa.
I wanted, yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to know how many units do we have that we would consider affordable? Because you were talking about building more medium income, I guess, or rentals or homes, but and then that would free up the affordable ones. But how many affordable ones do we actually have? That's the question. We can't assume there's a lot of people living that they want to move up and pay more rent and get a bigger place or a nicer place or whatever it is. We kind of have to know that and not assume it.
Well, of course, all these numbers are estimates because it would be an invasion of privacy to keep that kind of detail on individual units and families and households. But I think the estimate involves knowing what the median family or median household income is. And then I would say, working backwards from any estimates on homelessness that we might have, and I don't know that we have very much, but probably somebody local is the best person to make such an estimate. And then conclude that everybody else has a place to live. To judge the affordability, you'd have to probably go with a random sampling. It's a little complicated, but that's how I would answer that question if it were assigned to me.
Okay, thanks. Were you gonna say something? Frank?
We have 16 units next to the firehouse that are affordable.
Yeah, I was gonna say the firehouse apartments are 16 there.
What's the rent at those places
Um,
in dollars?
if you're 40% median, it's going to be 1/3 of 40% of your pay. The laws also skew the rents people pay, and the government makes up the difference. If that is lower than what the numbers are.
Are
I
there?
think for a 1-bedroom apartment, I think we're talking about 900, 800 bucks a month. Something like that.
That'd be nice.
It's not too hard to get that info, but it is gonna vary. Chittenden County, again, is certainly a lot different than it is, up in Orleans County. And things are developed in that way. The biggest population of people that are needy in this regard are seniors. It's the widow who's living on 17 grand a year. There's a significant number of men and women who are 65 plus that live on a wing and a prayer. And a lot of those folks are fortunate in that they have a home, but many of them are, there's no mortgage or anything, but they still have to deal with other issues of expense. And many of them end up moving. And then where they move to is they have to look for situations that meet their needs. And there's a few ways it happens, but it's not an easy deal. We had our 50th anniversary at the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and our director put a statistic on the board asking people to guess what you think the median income is of people in affordable housing units that we have, and people guessed all over the lot. She put a marker to it, what it would be between, but the answer was 17 grand. 17 grand. Those are people that aren't working for 20 bucks an hour at McDonald's. Those are people that are probably disabled, and a lot of them are seniors. And to go back to what Bill said, the real solution to this, the long-term solution to this is to build, baby, build. And unfortunately, there's many things that prevent it. And, you know, for us in Bristol, that's one of the reasons I've always pushed for making 1 acre less to build. And I noticed in the notes, because I wasn't there for the meeting, you know, one of the constraining things is septic. Can an acre support 4 units if you made it 1/4 of an acre? And some wouldn't. So where do you put these 900 square foot mini houses where you can put 8 on an acre? Well, you're gonna have at least 8 bathrooms, and you know, the state's rules about bathrooms are pretty clear, and you can't put 8 bathrooms you know, in that type of a scenario. So it's a multi-factored situation to make things work. And some people eventually will either struggle with this and struggle with this, or someone's going to say, this is ridiculous, we've got to change things. And they would have to be changed in a meaningful way. Not a little bit here and not a little bit there. And there certainly would be people that will be happy with that. At least that's my view from 30,000 feet. Because the changes that are occurring now are very modest in nature. And the demand for housing is very great. I think in Bristol, we're fortunate. I think our housing meets the demand we have in Bristol, quite frankly. You look at the people we employ, but we're helping out Shelburne, we're helping out Middlebury, etc. I mean, how many people work in Bristol? How many people have jobs here? And how many homes do we have and units do we have? I am sure we cover that very nicely, including the retired people. And if you add Lincoln and Starksboro, yes, John, sure.
Exactly.
We don't have a lot of folks that are employed here as compared to other communities. It's gone down and down in recent years. Schools easily the biggest employer, but we're supporting others in a region, and we're a desirable community to live in because of the nature of the community.
And remember that Bristol residents chose that deliberately over time. It was in our town plan for years that we were okay with being, and these are my words, a bedroom community. Not to the exclusion of wanting to have our own businesses, and we certainly spent a lot of effort and encouragement in earlier prior town plans and having businesses and such here. But you know, Bristolites have been very clear-eyed about providing that service, I think, as you put it, Fred, to other communities by giving people a place to live and then commute to those communities. But so that's one comment, but I don't know. I can tell you only from my personal experience that the demand for housing in Bristol is vastly unmet, gauging by the number of inquiries I have on a weekly basis for people who not just want to live here, but like need to be closer to their job or want to work here, take a job here, but need housing first, or have a job here, but can't move here from out of state because they can't find housing, you know, for even really elite jobs that are paying 6 figures and stuff like that. So, and working, what do they call it now? Like wage earner, workforce housing, you know, and it's very short. Just that's one person's measure, mine alone, the calls I get every week.
You're exactly right, John. That is true. I'm just saying, I think the issue is brought upon by the places that do have a lot of workers and do have a lot of need for housing. And the housing is going to spread out from that area to meet the demand. And I'm not saying we couldn't use more housing. I think just from if every town was responsible for having housing for their town, we'd be in good shape. But that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. I understand. Middlebury is under building for the demand that they have there. And so isn't many places in Chittenden County with the jobs that they have and the needs that they have there. And other communities support that, the Colchesters, the Miltons, etc. Sure.
So I think if I recall this article that we've been talking around is a year old, and I don't know, some things have changed a whole lot in a year's time or not, but if I recall out of that article, and Bristol's no different. I mean, we talked about everybody wants to move to Bristol because it's perfect. Well, the same thing is going on in Charlotte and Heinsberg and Middlebury. So it's not unique to Bristol. And if I recall, that article identified a lack of housing or a housing need between 30 and 40,000 units in Vermont. So, I mean, it's a big issue. And we've talked about the supply side of it and all that kind of stuff tonight. So I think we've kind of batted this around, good discussion. There's been some good identities, action items. I'd like to move on. I don't know if anybody's got any closing comments.
I have one quickie.
Okay.
We talked a lot about just building and stuff, but I think there might be another approach, or I wonder, I don't know. I wonder if there's another approach to, for example, addressing what I think is really right on. And Fred was saying about the need for, housing for senior housing. I don't know, is there a way, and I don't need an answer now, but I put this out there and let's think about it. Maybe, is there a way to incentivize in a particular locations or zone or whatever, the creation of housing, senior specific housing, along the lines of what is the development on Mountain Street, Upper Mountain Street?
Yeah.
We know the one you mean.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
that's senior specific and I believe subsidized to some degree. Like, I don't know, is there something that we could do in our zoning that would invite that desirable thing in a place or smooth the path for encouraging people maybe to make that investment? I don't know, but maybe that's worth thinking about.
Okay, great. So I'm sure it's not a dead issue as we continue this discussion about housing. But I think we've had some good discussion tonight and I'd like to move on unless I'm not hearing anybody wanting closing comments here. The next item is ZA administrator processes. So AZ is finding certain things that kind of make you go, huh, with the processes, and this will be a time for her to identify some of that and not, again, kind of have some dialogue about what might happen, but this isn't an action, and it's something that is I think it's an awareness thing as we start talking through other aspects of this, things for the next zoning revision. So it's AZ.
Yeah, so been doing this for about 7, almost 8 months now. And at first I was just learning from Chris, but as I've transitioned into being full-time and being the actual zoning administrator, not just learning from Chris, I've begun to notice some patterns, some frustrations from residents when they come to my office. Some things that I've noticed just through processing permits. And a big one is I've heard from multiple people, and I think it's been a trend in the past, that people don't feel like they get enough notice. They don't feel like the permit poster is enough. I've had 3 different people in the past 2 weeks who have told me separate stories of feeling gypped by the kind of appeal window and the permit posting. I'm not saying that I think we should change it from the state statute of 15 days, but it's been something I've been pondering of how to better ensure that neighbors are being told and noticed properly, other than just the posting of the permit in a window on a tree. Trying to find a way to ensure that neighbors feel like they are not getting gypped and that the landowner is not just like pushing through on permits. That's something that I have just noticed a lot, and I think as I've learned about past zoning occurrences, I've the appeal window has come up a lot where people have missed the appeal window and then they can't do anything about their frustrations with approved permits. So that's something I've been seeing. I think some other things that I've been just kind of questioned on is something that I've questioned on is in the regulations, there's 3 different definitions that are brought up for square footage. And when it comes to permitting a house, what is the footprint? People ask me a lot, if I have a roof overhang, does that get included into the footprint? Do I have to worry about that in my setback? And so that kind of poses me a question of if someone's house is a certain square footage, but then they're gonna have a roof overhang that adds an extra 3 feet all around the building, should that be accounted for into zoning? Should that be part of it? Just questions I've come up, because if someone builds a building 10 feet required by the setback, but their roof overhang is 3 feet, how does that impact things? Along with that, looking at the floor area and kind of the difference between the actual total square footage of a building versus what is actually habitable. So if you have a mechanical room that's just vents, that takes up a 5 square foot like area in your home, that's the total square footage of the building. But is that habitable? Is someone going to be in that space using it every day?
I don't think so.
If it's like yeah.
Just saying, that's, I mean, I can only see that that's part of.
Yeah.
The square footage. I don't
Yeah.
think there's much question for that one. Some of these, they need to keep going.
Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
that counts. Yes, that counts.
Yeah, so that's. Yeah, that was the definition I just wanted to double check on. And then, so those were some things. And then, this was a recent one that came up. Someone came in and was telling me about their frustration that, there was a building that burned down 60 years ago. But then someone wanted to rebuild in the exact footprint of that structure that had been gone for 60 years. And it got approved even though it was non-conforming. And it was, but it had been there 60 years ago. And I was wondering if adding in something into the Bristol zoning about a discontinuance, about if, because permits expire after 2 years. So I think it should be the same thing with if buildings have burnt down, if there's a discontinued use with a building, if there's changes like that, where you can't just say, oh, this was non-conforming 10 years ago, so I'm gonna continue the non-conforming. Finding a way to make sure that that's solidified along with the permits and yeah, the 2-year window for the permit, and then there's another. Yeah, that having a discontinuance, because I do think that's important. If it's gone, it should stay gone unless it's historic, but we're not trying to increase non-conformances. And I think that is something I looked through the regulations and I didn't see anything direct about discontinuances, but I was spending today reading the Middlebury and Virgin zoning regulations to see what they're doing in comparison to us. This is more tied into tiny homes or ADUs and mobile homes and tiny homes. Kevin and I were having a conversation and we're talking about what makes a structure. I've been working with someone who has a tiny home that's on a trailer, so it has wheels, and they want to make that an ADU on their property. Making that an ADU would be taking it off the wheels, making it landed. But this kind of brings up this question of mobile homes, tiny homes, manufactured homes. Are these all kind of under one umbrella? Are we treating them as separately? Like, as more people start to want to have tiny homes, maybe want to do manufactured homes, how do we bring that into the regulations moving forward? And then also changing that of like, if someone wants to have an unlanded tiny home on their property,
You're on wheels.
Unlanded, you mean?
unlanded, like a mobile home that, like the KTP, those mobile homes are unlanded, they're not tied to the ground. I mean, yes, they are, but, legally, the land is owned by us and how they, yeah, so not just that it's on wheels, but questions of that. Mm, 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 mm. Something that came up a little bit ago, was the Firehouse Apartments wanted to put an EV charger in their parking lot. And they provided me a site plan. And because that was a conditional use, under the regulations, they would have to go back to the DRB to get approval to put in that EV charger. Which when they found out they had to do that, they withdrew their application. They didn't want to go through that process. And that brought up to me the question of administrative amendments. And I actually, in the Virgin's zoning regulations, they do have a section on minor amendments to zoning permits that can be done by the ZA. And I have that pulled up for y'all on Zoom. This is taken from the Virgin's zoning regulations. This is just something I want to bring up. I know that zoning oversight is a concern for the planning commission, and I do think that it's important to, this is not me wanting to go willy-nilly and just start approving everything. But I do think this would be beneficial for situations like the Firehouse Apartments where they just want to add in a minor utility. It's a small change. It's not impacting parking in a big way, other than EV charger, an EV car would go there. And looking at these criteria, I thought that was just a good starting place, something to have y'all chew on. And I think as more applications come to the DRB in the future, hopefully for development, finding a way to not bog the DRB down with minor things in the future is something that I would like, and just something that I've been thinking of minor things that could help move along the process. Yeah,
How onerous is it to go to the DRB? It costs some money.
costs some money, and right now the DRB has been having issues meeting quorum.
Okay.
That's
But pretty much, if it was working, it would just be the money, can you show up, and probably pretty much, that sounds a good idea, it wouldn't
Yeah,
take long, right?
it wouldn't take long, but with the DRB being volunteer board,
Yeah, I get it.
there's some things that, yeah, I do think the DRB, like, that's why I'm saying I don't want site plan amendments to just become a willy-nilly thing.
Yeah.
It's something that I went,
Okay.
there
yeah,
should be a
okay,
way to,
Thank you, yeah, I get it.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
And then I have one last thing.
Can you back up a little bit? What section is this? Is this Article 3, Section 313?
Yep, Article 3, Section 1313.
Thanks.
Yep, and this is the Virgin's UDR essentially. Then one last thing that I've just been thinking of is permit fees. I think as more people are applying for ADUs, I think it makes sense to maybe change the permit fees based on if you're doing a residential kind of permit basing that, or changing accessory structures to just be kind of a flat rate of $50 in the middle between 35 and 85, of just like, if you're doing an accessory structure, here's this, but if you're doing an ADU, we're gonna do the same thing where it's square footage plus the base $50.
Accessory dwelling unit in an ADU, the same thing.
Yes.
There's one here for 85 and there's one for 35.
Yeah, square footage.
Square footage determines the number.
Yeah. Currently if an accessory building is under 200 square feet, it's 35. If it's over 200 square feet, so that $35 one is a tiny home. And
It's the home, not the size of the unit.
yeah. Well, it's the square footage of the permit.
It was 200 or less,
Yeah, it's 35, and then 200 more is 85.
tiny home.
Yeah, yeah. But those are the things that I've just been thinking on, noticing, hearing from people who come into my office.
Any questions for AZ?
Well, I think they're good observations, some more than others. And I think we should address them.
But to me, to anybody else? John?
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate hearing that, all of that. Because I think that helps us understand how the regs are working and more how the system is working, including the planning that goes into making the regs, et cetera. So really valuable. Try to find a way to, put those down in some systematic fashion, almost like, I always appreciate the chairman's parking lot, on the notes. So a parking lot of sorts where you keep that list.
Yeah,
It's just very valuable to get that feedback. It really is, because it matters how it works. At the very beginning of the regulations, it's sort of a preamble. It says that they're supposed to be clear, understandable, and fair. Something to that effect. And, getting feedback like that shows where there may not be clear, understandable, or fair, or any one of those things that for some people, and that's helpful to know.
yeah.
Anybody else? So I agree, this is, paying attention to our definitions. By and large, the manufactured home thing, at least from my point of view, is in the state statute, there is some anti-discriminatory things about mobile homes and blah, 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 and that may be why. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't capture it better than we have, but that may be why it's so nondescript, fees, I think that's a select board responsibility.
That's the select board. Okay.
I'm not totally sure on that, but yeah, straight information. I would suggest go along with what John says, and we can talk about it offline. When waste a lot of time here is start looking at this stuff and pigeonholing it right within the sections of the zoning outline, if you will, and you just have this little side thing going on. And as we talk about these things, if we do have people come in and we start leaning against different things we want to do with ADUs or short-term housing or blah, 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 we can start pigeonholing that stuff in the appropriate sections so that when we get to the time that we're looking at modifying regulations, bam, that's all right there by section or whatever, or what have you.
Actually, I just remembered one thing. I got a permit today for a accessory building in the commercial district. And when I went to do my double checks of setbacks and all the other requirements, I noticed that in the regs, in like that, not in the matrix, but like in the actual like page based on them, accessory buildings and structures in the commercial district have the site plan review asterisk. but in the zoning matrix, they're permitted by right.
Hmm.
So I wanted to double check with y'all of which one I should go with. Because my impression was that an accessory building was a by right in pretty much every district except for the recreation, but the regs say it's a site plan review. And before I do anything, I thought I would check with y'all.
Whose is it? We'll decide on that.
In the world of code review, you take the most restrictive.
Take the most restrictive.
Yeah,
That's
and I
right.
don't know, we should be applying that, probably should apply that to zoning regs as well, I suppose.
That's generally the operation, yes.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure that we have our terminology, that I have our terminology right. I mean, an accessory building or accessory structure is not the same as an ADU. An ADU is not an accessory structure and not an accessory building. It's an ADU. And when you stack those on top, when you have a garage, which is an accessory structure, that has an ADU on top, that's an animal that has escaped regulation and it is now unregulated. And it could cause some of the feedback that you're gonna get, AC.
Yeah.
That is a huge loophole that we created in these regs.
I have noticed that people, a lot of people are wanting to turn like the upstairs of a garage into an ADU. But when people do ask me about that, I'm very clear on the size of that second floor. If you have a barn that is already the right size and you want to put it up there, that's changing the upstairs use. That's, you have to, if you're changing the upstairs, you have to meet the use of an accessory dwelling unit, you have to have the septic, you have to have the parking, the size requirements. So it is a beast. But I feel like I have the right tools to handle it. And there have been examples in the past of what not to do. And
And our regs now contain half of an old rule that's still in force, and the other half that makes it logical is excised. And that's gonna be a problem, I think, going forward.
Okay, so, any other questions on what AZ has presented to us, or comments?
Well, I'm tempted to bring up have one comment on this Garfield Street.
No, let's not,
So
let's stay away,
specific.
let's stay away from Garfield Street,
Okay.
because we'll
We'll
just
talk
stay
to
away.
you offline.
That's a done
It
deal.
shouldn't be. Garfield Street is the perfect example of failure. Perfect learning opportunity for us. Perfect.
Garfield Street was an error in issuing the permit.
It was a disaster on many fronts. It
On
had
two-
multiple
there was-
reasons why it was a disaster.
There was two reasons that permit was not properly issued, and that's the end of that discussion.
Well, it shouldn't be the end. of the
Disagree.
discussion. Is that still a duplex out front and somebody living in the back or not?
It's
This is-
beyond.
It's handled miserably by the town. The town punted completely. Total
So
failure.
it's beyond our discussion tonight.
Well, then we won't learn from it. Not tonight. I don't need to discuss it tonight, but as we go forward, it's a learning opportunity for us. If we look at it.
Okay, on to administrative matters. We've got minutes from October 15th. Anybody want to entertain a motion to approve?
I would so move.
Second,
Sure.
okay. Motion by John to approve, seconded by Slim. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, looks like it goes. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
There you go.
I'll abstain.
One abstention, okay? Still passes. If you have followed the voting for the recent election, the town did approve the UDR that we worked on as part of the bylaw grant administration. And what was the The vote was 853 to 358. And AZ is going to be closing out that with regional planning. We still owe the state some GIS information and then tidy up the doc and make sure that what we have and start using as the official doc is up to date.
Why do we think so many people voted against it?
Because, I mean, that's actually not very close.
That's,
Well, it's not very close.
But there are people that are just like, say no, you know?
I suppose, but usually like, oh, we believe in our select. board,"
It's like,
and stuff, and then,
oh,
oh, yes.
Well-
If you're out now,
I think a
That's-
lot of people, I had a lot of people who came in with questions on what was changing with the zoning. And with the zoning map, people were coming in asking if the land behind me is gonna get developed, which is my favorite question to tell people, I don't know. And the only way you can prevent that is if you buy the land behind you. That's my favorite question, and it's an easy answer of, I don't know,
buy that land.
buy the land. But a lot of people did come in with questions, and I'm sure that a lot of people that did vote no probably had questions, and instead of asking, they might have just said, "Wow."
I'm not sure, so.
That's why we don't have as much affordable housing as we should.
So that's like 32% of the people that said no, so that's not very much.
That's pretty much a landslide, and then most others, that's right.
And you're gonna have the vote no's for whatever reason in any sort of election.
I like it the way it is.
So the next thing is hazard and mitigation plan update steering committee, I think. Are you all done, Shannon?
Well, yes, because we actually were supposed to have a meeting in October, which we canceled. The meeting in September involved myself and Mallory and Stephanie Mingan at the state level. And they sort of finalized the plans. I guess Valerie had a few things that she was gonna add to it, and they were gonna put it out there for public comment. And then the last two meetings have been canceled, so I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Forgot about the zoning reports, but
Oh,
if anyone's interested, I can go over the zoning report.
Of which we have copies right here.
Well, yeah, but they don't have copies.
No, they don't.
Sure.
Oh, yay, I'm glad you asked, John.
I'm distracted here.
It's slowing down in the zoning office in terms of permits. A lot of storage sheds. A really cute application for the treehouse. Even though that is exempt, but it was over the size. So it does need a permit since it was over 64 square feet. Some additions, the library is trying to get a gazebo out back, but they're currently at the DRB right now trying to get a waiver. This permit right here, 2464, is waiting on state septic. Whenever I receive applications for residential buildings and they do not have septic, they are not complete until I receive the septic. And I'm waiting on that.
AZ, I'm sorry, could you zoom in on that a little bit? It's hard to see on Zoom.
Yeah,
Thank
is
you.
that better? Is that better?
Yeah, I think
Great.
so, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. It's on zoning applications. If they need state permits, that is required to be a complete application. And I'm working on a worksheet that will help people understand what they need for each application and what they're applying for. Been dealing with a couple back end zoning related circumstances that have been taking up a lot of my time. There's a notice of violation, that's going through the motions right now. Some E911 addressing concerns that have also been taking up my time, but so far it's been mostly sheds, 2 ADU applications, Stan's building a house on Devon Lane, and then garage, and the one non-building permit, Jody Bartlett, he is doing a home occupation. He had originally applied for a conditional use to do used car sales. And I denied him that, as used car sales was not a use in that district. So he applied for a home occupation to do Facebook Marketplace sales based out of his house. I talked through him with the criteria for a home occupation. And he confirmed with me that the business will be operated out of his home. It'll be online. No materials will be seen from the public right of way or stored outside. And he is getting this home occupation so he can get state permits to go to used car auctions. And that was a permit that made sure it was very clear with him the requirements of a home occupation.
There won't be cars parked outside.
There won't be cars parked outside, and that's the biggest thing that I made very clear with him. That was, even though I cannot assign conditions to a permit, that is a criteria for the permit, and if there are cars outside, I told him I will be coming after him for that. That's a rundown of the zoning, what's been approved, what's in the works.
I mean, I asked, what can you come after him with? What are your possible sanctions for somebody who?
It would be send him a letter first of just saying, hey, this is a warning, you're in violation by having publicly visible cars. If he doesn't fix it, if he doesn't remedy it, then I would send a letter of a notice of violation, in which he had 7 days after that to fix it. If after the 7 days he doesn't, the town can pursue with financial fees. Right now it's 4 times the permit fee. And that expense occurs every day that the violation occurs, so it can rack up really quickly. Another one would be that he would have to cease use, and the town can use a cease and desist. Once it goes to NOV, the penalties are decided by the town, not me. But
Thank you.
an NOV comes from me and then goes up to the town.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the ZA zoning administrator's report? Okay, we'll pop back down to discussion. There is in the chair notes some various correspondence that has occurred within the last month. One other piece of information is Anna Daler, who was on the board, hasn't been with us much the last several months. She tendered her resignation, so we do have an open spot on the planning commission now. Is there any comment about any of that or question? Okay, next item of business is public comment. Any public comment? Jim?
Okay, I just want to commend you guys on all the work you've done this past year. You've done a great job. AZ seems to be doing really good. And I really like all the comments you came up with tonight, AZ. Very important issues, and you guys are on top of everything. I myself appreciate what you've done. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. As not seeing any more public comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Fred moves, Slim seconds. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, we're done. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Has
Good night.
anybody ever
Aye.
opposed a motion to adjourn? I don't know if I've ever seen.
Thanks,
Has anybody-
everybody.
Oh, gosh.
Right.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.